And what I composed was what Matt sent out. And it says, the knowledge needed to address the large and deep issues transformatively doesn't come from what most of us talk or think about regularly in our day-to-day life. The needed resource comes from a deeper reservoir within that only comes out abundantly when there is an individual who is skilled at unlocking the lid of the reservoir in others, and people are willing to trust that they have the brilliance within. And I said, Matt, I don't plant seeds. I unlock the vault. And I understand the concept of planting seeds that we now reference in education today. But I think that's one of the problems. And Matt talked about correction versus connection. So I'm just going to preface everything I say today with when I was a kid, which was growing up in the 60s and 70s, one of the things I hated the most was going to the pediatrician's office. I could not stand going to the pediatrician's office. And the reason why, the first thing we had to do was they had to do a blood test. Now, back then, they didn't have this little pin that they prick your finger with. It was a brand new razor blade. So they would tear open, get the razor blade, rub iodine and rub my finger, and then cut me. Get these glass tubes, suck up the blood, put it on a petri dish. Want to talk about trauma? Unbelievable trauma. I don't care what you did with that thing they stuck under my tongue for 5 minutes. It did not feel good. No matter what shape you made it, it did not feel good. Because I was a male, I was going to be grabbed in a very sensitive place and told to cough. I mean, traumatic. But there was one thing I loved inside the office. It was the only thing that was palpable. Going to the doctor. And it was a magazine. It wasn't a person. And the magazine was on a coffee table, and it was this one. It was Highlights. Now, I loved Highlights magazine. The thing is, I was not a good reader. So I never read this magazine. There was only one activity in there that I enjoyed. And it was find the hidden objects. That's the first time I ever saw what a hockey stick looked like, what an old iron would used to look like. You know what used to piss me off? When I pick it up, open it, and somebody circle all the objects. Piss me off because they ruined the whole game. And the reason why I'm sharing that with you is I believe most speakers today, when they're addressing audience, go around circling everybody's object, telling everybody what to think, what they should know. And I am a storyteller. And in my stories are many hidden objects. And based on who you are, what you do, your experiences, your responsibilities, you might find a few. I do my best not to go around circling any objects because if you find them, they're yours. And now the game is yours. So just kind of set the stage with that. That's actually when I talk about unlocking the lid. So as you go through this time together with myself and with Ali and Kamakani, I would just ask you to notice the hidden objects as I start to unlock this lid or this vault with stories. So I'm going to pull up a slide. Let's see, can I share the screen? Okay. Can everybody see that? I think you can. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to share just a few slides because I don't want to do PowerPoint too much today. But in 2018, Laureen Powell Jobs and the Emerson Collective hosted an event um, in Northern California called a Dew Fest. It was a festival of doers. And they invited 150 people from around the planet that they identified doers as doers. Now, how they figured that out, I'm not sure. But I was so fortunate to be invited. And it was not with an agenda, it was really an invitation that these folks would come together to learn, to support, to connect, to share. There was no major agenda other than let's just have a community come together of doers. And I was so honored. Um, that's Laureen in the middle. Her brother is to the right. That's Brad. That's Ernie Moniz, who was the Secretary of Energy under President Obama. Astro Teller, who is with Google X, and he's just a brilliant man. And then next to me is Andy Karsner, who was the Assistant Secretary of Energy under President Bush, and really special friends. And that photo was taken at Earth Day in 2018 when I was asked to give the closing keynote for that event, sponsored by Emerson and Elemental Energy. And because of that, I think was the reason why I was invited to the Dew Fest. And on the very first day of the Dew Fest, I heard this woman, Susan Elsner, get up during a Q&A and talk about her experience working with the United Nations. So she was a contractor who was responsible for bringing community to the UN. And during this Q&A, she stood up and she shared what her responsibilities were. And she said, I really experience the marginalization that occurs at that level with people and the gentrification. And she was carrying something very heavy. By the way, this young lady who's in the pink shirt, some of you may or may not recognize Kathy Jetnell, who is at Marshallese Poet. And Susan is the one who brought Kathy to the UN, to the General Assembly. Now, in the history of the United Nations, there have been 3 standing ovations in the General Assembly. Only 3. One was Mother Teresa, the other was Nelson Mandela, and then the third person was Kathy Jetnell, the Marshallese poet, which is pretty remarkable when you think about that collective of giants. But Susan shared that. And, the way that I was observing the interaction of her statement, her reflections with these 150 people was that many of them are designers, they're educators, they're engineers, they're ideators. And as I was watching them, it was almost like they were taking it in like this is a survey. Like, if she says this is what we need to consider when we're doing our design. And I just felt that's not what she's sharing. She's teaching us. She's not a survey. And so I was really intrigued, and I wanted to meet with her. And all week I was just observing her. And on the last day, fate would have it, we were the very 2 people who showed up late for breakfast. So we got to spend time together, and we spoke for 8 hours that day. Well, at one moment, Susan says, Pono, I need to tell you a story about refugees and immigrants. And I said, Susan, I'm so very sorry, but could you pause your story? Because I just found some medicine and I need to type it in my phone before I forget. And she said, sure. So I typed my thoughts into my phone, and she says, what was the medicine you found? And I said, the medicine I found is that we have named these people wrong. They are not refugees and immigrants. They are navigators and peace seekers. And the minute I said that, Susan just started to tear up. And she couldn't talk. And I said, see, Susan, if someone sees himself as a refugee and immigrant, how might you see yourself? As a problem. But if you see yourself as a navigator and peace seeker, what are you? You're a resource. If I call you a navigator and peace seeker, you're a resource for me. But if I see you or call you as a refugee and immigrant, now you're a problem I have to carry. I said, here are people who are navigating through hell, seeking peace. And the courage, the knowledge, the wisdom, the resilience they're learning on this journey is what we need. We talk about resilience. These people are living resilience. They are not refugees and immigrants. They're navigators and peace seekers. And I continue to develop that story because the Hikianalia had come to be with us too at the Dew Fest. And Lehua was the first female captain, navigator, probably to navigate the North Pacific, maybe in the history of the world, a double hull canoe. And what happened on that voyage to come to be with us at the Dew Fest was she ran from 3 hurricanes, including Hurricane Lane. And she had 10 days of no stars, just storms. And it was the most dangerous oceans in the world at that time. And Nainoa told this story after they had arrived and made it safely to San Francisco. He said, you know, for 10 nights, there were only clouds. And he got on the phone with Lehua and he said, turn the canoe around. He said, this is the most dangerous oceans in the world. You need to come home right now. You don't know where you are. You have no stars. You need to come home now. And Lehua said, Nainoa, we cannot come home. I'm not coming home. She started to, in my opinion, stand up and possibly defy her teacher. You're the one who said we cannot stay tied to the pier. We cannot come home. We promised we were coming. We cannot come home. Give me one more day. The stars will come out tomorrow. Just one more day. I've shared this story with some very deep friends, and I said, you know, I believe until the teacher and student have this conversation, the stars don't come out. Because this is not about the stars. This is about the relationship between the teacher and the student. Is the teacher really willing to let the student go? And is the student really willing to go? So Nainoa lets her go. And the next night, the stars come out. They know exactly where they are. And she just pivots that canoe and comes in 3 days early. And I said to Susan, we go down and we celebrate, we welcome, we greet, and we honor. We are the doers, and we go down to the pier as they're coming into the harbor. And we celebrate them. Why? Because what they're bringing to us, they bring what we need. We are the doers. And the navigator and the peace seeker is bringing what we need. They are not refugees and immigrants. And Susan just starts sobbing. And she says, I'm sorry, but I need to submit your name to the UN. You need to go deliver this medicine. No, I didn't. I told her, you go. I don't need a platform. She has it. You share the medicine. The reason why I'm sharing that story with you was about a month later, Laureen's brother, Brad, calls me and he says, you know, I'm going to be in town tomorrow and for just a very short period. And I need to talk with you, and I need to talk with you very, very urgently. I have a problem and no one can help me with this, and I think you can. So before I get back on a plane, can I just spend an hour with you? So she said, sure. So I met him after an event, and we went outside and we talked, and I told him about that story because nobody else knew about that story with Susan and I. That was private. And And then he shared with me what his issue was. They were building a community center and designed a community center in East Palo Alto. And they had put out an RFP. Um, and they had vetted over 200 designers to build this center, and now they were down to their final two. And he says, I've had my entire team, and I know who his team are, and they're brilliant. They hire, the highest that they can. That's what Lorene does. They go after the best that they can to help the world. And he said, I've talked to my entire team, but nobody can help me make a decision, and the decision's mine. And I don't know who to choose. There are two. The first one, their designs are the greatest. When you know and you see what they've done around the world, they're so amazing what they do. But they don't talk about community. They just design, but they don't talk about community. And then he says, and Pono, and I believe I know what you're going to tell me, who to choose. He said, the second one, they're not as strong, but everything they talk about is community. They talk about that the community is at the center. He said, but their designs are not that strong. And I don't know who to choose. I'm stuck. Okay, so she's a $30 billion woman. She got some pretty good attorneys, I imagine, to help her make this decision, him to make this decision. But he's stuck. So I asked him a question, and the question was, Brad, who do you want? And I don't want you to tell me your answer, because I wanted him to know that I already knew his answer. Who do you want? And I said, the reason why you cannot choose is because neither one of them has the community. The second one talks about community, but that doesn't mean they have the community. See, the reason why you can't make the decision is because you don't need the community, and you know this to be the problem, the refugee and immigrant, that these designers are solving the problem, them. You need the community to be the navigator and peace seeker. They are not the problem. They are the resource. And that's why you can't make a decision. Because if either one of them had the community, the decision's done. So, do you need me to come and work with the community, to help the community to know that they are the navigators and peace seekers, so that they are the resource for the one that you want to choose? And this is what Brad said. Yes, done. This is done. Yes. I hope you folks find some hidden objects in what I just shared. There are some major hidden objects in what I just shared. That's the first story. The second story is, it was February of 2018, same year. And I had spent the entire day on the Big Island. I was in Kona working with the state librarian because they had a summit of all the library workers on Hawaii Island for one day, and asked me to come and work with them. So I spent the entire day, and a friend who worked for Southwest Airlines as the gate manager at H&L asked me if I would meet them for dinner, him and the gate manager for Kahului, if I could meet them for dinner at 7:00. So I got off the plane and I went to go meet them for dinner, because I'm so sorry. because this Kahului manager, he wanted to meet me. So we go to dinner, and this boy is a Samoan boy. Well, he's a man. He's in his 40s, and he was born and raised in Nanakuli. And at about age 10, his father, who was a Marine, moved to California, and they've been gone ever since. But he would come home and visit family. Um, Found out we had very, very many mutual friends. But he says, "So, Pono, is this what you do? You talk about aloha? Because I mean, I've heard so much about you, and everybody says, you talk about aloha." And I said, "No, that's not what I do. That's what people ask me to do. Maybe we should talk about why we're having dinner tonight. How do we find ourselves having dinner over here tonight?" And he says, "Okay." So I said, it was 2009, and I wasn't the CEO of the Oahu Economic Development Board. Um, I was on the staff, but I know that they needed to replace the former CEO, Mike Fitzgerald, and they were looking very strongly at me. And Mike was invited, the CEO, to speak at a Rotary Club meeting. And he didn't want to go. He was leaving in a month, Hawaii. He didn't want to go and speak. So he says, "Pono, would you go and speak?" I hate speaking at Rotary, but he said, "No, you'll be great." So I go to this Rotary Club. It's a very large one. I'm sitting at lunch. The president is sitting to my right. The lady who's my host is sitting to my left. And the president leans over and he says, "Okay, this is the plan. At 12 o'clock, we're going to start the program and we're going to say the prayer and the pledge. There will be a few announcements. And then what's going to happen is we're going to have the committee chair of this competition that we had, an essay competition for all the public schools in Hawaii, announce the winners. And this program is writing about the 4 wins of the Rotary, which are the foundational values of their Rotary Club. And so he's going to be announcing the first, second, and third prize winners. Their parents are here, their teachers are here, and so we're going to honor them. At 12:20, we're going to take a 10-minute bathroom break. At 12:30, we're going to introduce you. Notice, agenda, right? Because agendas are important. At 12:30, we're going to introduce you. You got 25 minutes to talk, 5 minutes of Q&A, and 1 o'clock, we're walking out that door. So I laugh internally. So 12 o'clock, prayer and pledge. 12:10, the committee chair gets up and he introduces the program by saying this. When I read the quality of these essays that were coming from our high school students, like the winner, I felt like I was reading something out of Princeton. And then he announces the winner is this junior from Kapolei High School. And he turns to the president and he says, "Mr. President, is there time for Brandon to read his essay?" And the president says, "No." And he says, "Okay." So then they give their awards to the first and second and third prize. At 12 o'clock, bathroom break. So I stand up and I go and find Brandon's teacher. And I said, "May I speak with you?" And she said, "Sure." I said, "If Brandon were to read his essay, how long would it take?" And she said, "Probably about 8 minutes." I said, "Okay, thank you." I go back to my chair and I lean over and I talk to my host. And I said, "Who controls my time?" And she says, "You do." I said, "So I can do whatever I want with my time?" And she says, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, thank you." So they introduced me at 12:30. And I said, I was hired to be the kahu of Enterprise Honolulu, the Oahu Economic Development Board. Kahu, not priest, kahu, guardian of the conscience and the person responsible for doing the right thing at the right time. And so right now I'm going to do the Kahu thing. And Brandon, you take my time and you read your essay. His parents and his teachers all started crying. And I sat down in my chair. I closed my eyes and I listened to this boy's gift for 8 minutes. And it was masterful. And he left me with 12 minutes that I just launched off of his talk. Because on his talk, he cleared the way for me. So I'm telling this at dinner, and I said, so that's what I did. I gave the microphone away. And it was 3 years later that this fire captain who trains fire captains for the Honolulu Fire Department sends me an email and calls me and says, introduces himself, and he says, I train all the fire captains in Hawaii. And I just am about to graduate a class where one of these captains said, Cap, you know, the technical training, the financial management, the skills management, the oversight, the leadership program that we have is amazing, but there's something missing. And he said, what's missing? He said, aloha, that which connects all of us. And he says, okay, now the captain who trains, he's all about aloha. Today he's one of my best friends. And he says, so how can we do that? And he says, you know, there's this guy that I would recommend that maybe you talk to. So he said, he recommended you. So next thing you know, I'm speaking at the graduation class and I'm now helping the fire department. At their graduation, one of the leaders of the National Guard is there, and he also trains in leadership. And after my talk, he walks up to me and he says, would you come and help me and General Wong at the National Guard? So I said, so now I'm helping the National Guard. In 2015, that man at the National Guard retires and he ends up working for Governor Ige as his protocol officer for 2 years. In 2017, he is sent over to Department of Transportation airports. And when Southwest Airlines makes a decision that they're looking at Hawaii to open up the market for them, he's responsible for taking them to all of the different airports and hosting them. So during his field trip, he says, you know, I know that you're going to get training from HTA in Hawaiian culture and our values. But if you guys are really serious, there might be a few people that I think you want to talk to. So next thing, I'm getting a phone call from him and he says, hey, can you hold this date because Southwest Airlines wants to fly us to Dallas, to their headquarters, because they want to learn about our culture and they want us to learn theirs to see how we can connect. And so now I'm flying to Dallas. And for 3 days, I experienced their culture. And on the last day, the three of us who were there were asked to share ours. And I was the last speaker. And as I'm sitting there with the president and CEO of Southwest Airlines and 100 of their executives and their marketing people in a very beautiful place. And they introduced me, I stand up and I have this revelation. So I look at the CEO and the president, I said, you know, one of the things, well, the first thing I did was I said, how many of you ever lived in Hawaii? Spent some time there, maybe were born there. And one guy raises his hand and he says, I was a captain and I'm a captain, but I lived in Hawaii 10 years ago. And I said, when's the last time you went home? And he said, you know, I was just home 2 months ago and it was so great. And you know what? I got to eat my favorite food in the whole world, taco poke. Okay. And so he just starts elaborating. And when he's done, I looked at the president CEO and I said, did you see what I just did? I didn't ask him when's the last time he went to Hawaii. I asked him when's the last time he went home. So the reason why I do this anywhere I am in this world is because I believe anybody who's lived in Hawaii, I always want to remind them that, yeah, wherever you live, you also have a second home, and that's Hawaii. because we're a small place and we need all the connections we can get. And don't forget about Hawaii as your home. So the president and CEO, both of them are looking at me like, oh, this is a different talk. And I said, I just had this revelation. One of the things my colleagues and I are concerned about is that Southwest Airlines doesn't hire local. They don't hire from the community, they hire from within. And the revelation is this: with over 60,000 people, I know you have people who are from Hawaii. And maybe this is your opportunity to allow these people to move home. They know our culture, they know your culture, and they're the bridge. Maybe this is that opportunity to have them come home, because they've always maybe wanted to come home. Now, this boy who's now managing the gate at Kahului, the Samoan man, he says, that's what happened. In November, I put in my application as soon as I heard that we were going to be flying. And somewhere around March, all these emails are going around the country. Do we have people who are from Hawaii? Do they have interest in coming home? What are their positions? He said, that's what happened. I said, so tonight, you're the gate manager for Kahului. My friend Rob Lee, who is a former National Guard leader, is the gate manager for Honolulu. And we're having dinner. And the reason why we're having dinner tonight is because 10 years ago, I gave the microphone away to a boy who was told he could not read his essay. Because the second place winner's father, was that fire captain who told the training fire captain what's missing. I was not talking about aloha. I was living aloha. That's why we're having dinner tonight. The reason why I'm sharing this with you today, and I hope you find some hidden objects, is because Allison Saunders, is an intern in my office. This year, we decided that we would take 3 to work with me, and I bring them with me wherever I go. Every board meeting with my board. I serve on national boards. I'm the vice chair of the Hawaii Public Housing Authority. I invite them to everything. Well, I am so inspired by these. We ended up taking 5 because 5 applied. I'm so inspired them, and particularly Allie. Now, Allie just recently graduated from Seattle U. She's working at a law firm. Everything became remote. She couldn't afford to continue to pay rent in Seattle, so she moved home with her family. She's applying for law school. She just took her LSAT a few weeks ago. And she has a desire to make a difference in the renewable energy field and to effectively contribute to the transformation of our planet to heal. And I asked Allie, when Matt asked me if I would talk, I sent an email to him without asking Allie, can I have one of my interns come and share with everybody? Because I think I'd like all these professors and students to hear the voice of what inspires me and why I give the microphone away. I told Brad, you don't need them to be the refugees and immigrants. We need to be the resource for the resource, the navigator and peace seeker. And I just feel like I'm so blessed to be a resource for the resource, like Allie. This is not to get attention, this is to give attention. That is the legacy of our ali'i. That's why we have ali'i Trust. And so I've asked Allie to share today and just let it rip. Whatever comes up, comes up. And thank you, Allie, for sharing. And she's got to be super nervous because who's on this call? But it's okay. It's great. So, Allie, share what you can share. And I'll sit back and close my eyes.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much, Uncle Pono, for allowing me to have this opportunity. And thank you, everyone here. I feel so fortunate to be in a virtual room with so many amazing community leaders. Um, you all inspire me to do the work that I want to do in our community. So I just wanted to share a few tidbits that I've learned from my time at my internship with OEDB. Um, this has been unlike any traditional internship that I've ever taken on because I, the way I've learned to think has completely changed because of Uncle Pono's teachings. And first and foremost, the biggest lesson from him that I've learned is that connection versus correction. Um, and in one of our intern meetings that we have every week, he described correction as what needs to be done, what's on that checklist that we need to do. But connection is what we should be doing and what is actually going to bring about the change that we wish correction would. And I believe that connection has this profound impact on the way that our mindsets are, and that's great. But to take it to the next level, connection really empowers us to take action, really get to know other people, understand what moves people to get out of bed every morning. And I think that's one of the goals of this whole Climate Action Month, to not only educate people on the problems that we face, but to really empower people to want to make a difference. And I think the key to that is connection over correction. And so one example that I'll share of how I've seen this profound impact is when Uncle Pono spoke with the Kamehameha School's Ohana Engagement Program a couple of months ago. It was the first time that us interns were allowed to see him do his work, do his magic in the community. And the first thing he said, I'll never forget this, was, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you how to engage with your family and make better connections. I'm not going to give you a list of things to do. My values are the foundation and I just live them. And all I ask is that you live your values. And that was just so powerful to me because we live in a world where everyone's telling us, this is the right thing to do. This is what we should do. And for Uncle Pono and for the OEDB team, I've learned that all we need to do is live our values, and then people will begin to see that and live them too. And that's how we're going to bring about change in this world. And another really big gem that I've learned from Uncle Pono is this idea of reverence versus reference. Reference refers to the ideas of credentials, needs, policies, arguments, political parties, agendas. Reverence refers to who you are as a person, what your culture is, what your values are, what your ideas are, how you belong in this community. And so the difference between reference and reverence is that with reference, there's always going to be a winner and a loser. How do we connect people if at the end of the day, someone's going to always lose? That's not going to create community. Under reverence, we can create trust, we can create connections. And I believe that's the place we need to start in order to really make a big difference in this world. And when I was thinking about how this relates specifically to climate change and the environment, I know that every single one of us here care about the environment because of something deep within our hearts. It's not for a practical reason. There's some moment in time in our lives when we realized, I would do anything to save Hawaii. I would do anything to save our Aina and the beautiful oceans around us, the trees above us. And so I've been trying to challenge myself to really try to connect to people through stories like Uncle Pono shared. They are medicine. I guess an example I'll give is when I was in college, I studied environmental studies, and my first environmental studies class was right around when the IPCC report came out. And that report gives us all the information we need to know, right, about the environment and what's at stake in our future. That should be the most important thing to help us move in the direction we need to go, right? Instead, it left us feeling crippled. It left us in fear. It left our entire class feeling like we couldn't do anything. And that is correction to me. That's not connection. And so I think if Uncle Pono was our professor back in the day, back in that class, my environmental studies class, he would tell us to share our stories about why we care, to share our stories about what the environment means to us and when we started caring about that. Because Uncle Pono always says the information that we have is not more important than how we act. And so I just feel so inspired to be on his team, to really have shifted my mindset, and to know that this correction versus connection idea doesn't just apply to our work, doesn't just apply to our home lives, it applies to everything we do. And because of that, we're going to transform our community. So I hope that you continue to share your stories and share your medicine with others like Uncle Pono did with us today. It's only right to continue to pass it on. So thank you, Uncle Pono. I really appreciate this experience.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you so much. I'm going to read something to you folks, and then we'll just open it up to any questions or comments. But we're working on a program called Aloha Connects Innovation, and it's to help use CARES Act funding to get people moved into areas off the bench of unemployment and into areas that might provide a different future for them. And so we've been working on it for about 4 months now. The program's gone live 5 weeks ago. And it's so amazing to watch. But it's not just about that. It's people have been feeling like they're part of cattle calls. But how do we heal them? Because I've seen so often, we have these experts who do mapping exercises and logic models, if then statements. And I often wonder, and I tell them sometimes, in your if then statement, your if and then and your logic models, what if somebody says, I hate your guts? Where's that in your logic model? Where do I have that this person threw me under the bus or they lied to me? Where's that in your logic model? Because that really affects everything. But until we have that sensitivity to what Ali just talked about, I don't think we're going to become too efficient at managing our resources, especially our relationships. So it's how we do it, like she talked about. Anyway, one night, Omar Sultan and Kanoi Enos, two very, very dear and special friends, said, Uncle Pono, would you please capture the objective and the heart of what this is all about that we're working on? And so I sat down from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and I just put my pen to paper, and I'll share it with you. In the Broadway musical Chorus Line, there's a very poignant moment when the photographs of each auditioning dancer is collected, and a young man, Paul, begins to sing. Who am I anyway? Am I my resume? That is a picture of a person I don't know. What does he want from me? What should I try to be? So many faces all around, and here we go. I need this job. Oh God, I need this show. This simple lyric so clearly reveals a crisis of scarcity many have endured for years, and more so the need for a vision that defines health and relevance for all the residents of Hawaii through this horrible crisis created by COVID 19. It isn't usually until crisis or dramatic changes in society that risk and opportunity lock steps. In the past few decades, there have been many attempts to create an innovation economy that would be a new leg in Hawaii's economy. Like many good initiatives, we've designed to correct what's weak or wrong and invited others to teach or fix us when quite possibly we've neglected what's always been our greatest resource. In the 1960s, there was a competition in communication to connect more than two linear points. Until that time, communication was point to point, A to B and B to C, etc. The aspiration to connect points A, B, and C at the same time would be a communication revolution and global domination for the entity or country who figured it out. In 1968, at the University of Hawaii, a couple of PhDs led by Dr. Norm Abramson and grad students were assembled to help figure out a process that would allow the university to have the ability to connect with the neighbor island campuses and UH Manoa at the same time, not world domination. In 1971, the algorithm was completed, and the next task was to give it a name. With the many definitions of what they'd created, they disagreed on names until a grad student threw out the idea. Why don't we just call it Aloha and figure out the acronym later? Everyone agreed. Additive Links Online Hawaii Area was born, and this is how it works nearly half a century later. Whenever anyone in the world presses send on their cellular phone, connects to the internet, or connects to a satellite, the first code sent is called Aloha. Aloha truly connects. Is it possible that this part of Hawaii's history inspires a statement that who we need to be is who we have always been? What might we create because we are a community that has a higher tolerance and acceptance of differences in people? What might we design as a community that has lenses of creativity and innovation because of our limited natural resources and geographic isolation? What might we accomplish because we're a community which shares and is much more relational than transactional in culture? In 1992, with the acquisition of Castle and Cooke by David Murdoch, the people on the island of Lanai, who since 1930 through the 70s was producing about 75% of the pineapple in the world, was faced with a new future. The closing of pineapple production was devastating to a community whose entire economy was based on agriculture, and the pivot that was easiest and natural for Castle and Cooke was to align with Hawaii's largest industry. It was imperative that products or services to import dollars were needed to replace pineapple for the people of Lanai, and tourism was a chosen venture. Was it liberating for the residents of Lanai? Maybe from working in the fields or cannery if one didn't like it, but overall, probably not. For a community who worked through 4 generations in pineapple, it must have been a difficult transition. But without any real options for their own economic sovereignty, they shifted. Like the purchase of a Castle and Cooke by David Murdoch, COVID-19 has imposed upon Hawaii and leveled our largest industry and revealed the vulnerability that has been spoken of for at least a couple of decades. It's revealed the unequal access to information and opportunities of many families and communities. And although many have been able to take advantage of a digital world, COVID-19 has really revealed how weak the tourism scaffolding is for the people of Hawaii. This is not to say or imply that tourism is invaluable. It has been a tremendous industry for our state since it was first cast as our chosen economic driver, and the investments necessary to build it were made. What COVID-19 has revealed is how unstable it is and opens us to dream of moonshots that actually might liberate the gifts of innovation and creativity of our residents to a healthier future. Like Lanai in 1992, we find ourselves at a crossroads of change. This time, the risk can be our own. The investments of ourselves can be leveraged to inspire others to join us. And instead of being a laboratory for others, we can be a resource for others' laboratories. We believe Aloha Connect's innovation is a nod to what has always been and must always be our greatest resource other than our island home, you. We've come together to share, care, and embrace struggle, to discover and recover the gifts that many have neglected and dismissed in ourselves. We connect to create new opportunities in and for Hawaii from and with you. And we dream of a Hawaii where our economic measurement is not our belongings, but how we use and share what we have to inspire belonging and lives lived well. Matt, thank you so very much for allowing Ali and I to share some stories today. I hope people found a few hidden objects, but I'll just toss it over to you.
Oh, mahalo, Pono.